sensor data and all because of this caps and
it is actually they have considered enough options for that.
but it'll be fragmenting a lot, right, that way?
Need not be. The purpose of the use cases what you are going to do here are so specific. Imagine some examples, right? You want to know the status of a light. Or heartbeats you are going to send. So it is really for that. It's like if you want to thinking process, if you see 10 years back, if someone said Twitter will be having a 160 character, you would have laughed at it. But there is separate, right, exactly. So you have to, exactly. So the application and use cases what are thought here are very different. And if you really want the real flexibility on this one, you can still go with that because there is no restriction, right? You can still use the 3.0 for this.
3.0.
Yeah, right. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you.
We are done. Thank you so much, sir. We now move on to our next session, and for the same, we would like to call upon Mr. Shivesh Vishwanathan. Shivesh works as a senior consultant mobility at Persistent Systems. He has over 15 years of experience in mobile technologies, product management, and marketing, and has published articles and talked in leading magazines and events. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science from Nagpur University and MBA in strategy and from Duke University in the US. I think we should wait for 2 minutes probably. Can we take 2 minutes? Can we delay it by 2 minutes, sir?
Sure.
Yeah. I think
it started on the web. Server-side technologies are the ones that enabled web services and APIs and all to be exposed, and all of those started on the web. A lot of smart AJAX kind of applications, but eventually, and right now they are in mobile, somewhere in between the web and eventually going into consumer goods and Internet of Things. So televisions, washing machines, and all those things. So we are pretty soon going to come here, right? What enables it at the back end is actually cloud computing and web services. And the result of this consumerware revolution is that we are going to be very communally productive. We're all going to be, and by that I mean that we're not going to be working in our own silos. There'll be intelligence gathered from people like me, from cars like me if I'm driving a car, all of that to actually feed into my application, right? So it's not about individual productivity anymore, but also about communal productivity. So that's the sort of background that I wanted to give. So very quickly, defining consumerware. Now, if there are consumer goods, there has to be consumerware to make it connect to the internet and connect to each other. The simplest definition that I can put forth is consumerware is consumerization of software. We have to look at consumers, we have to look at their preferences, their opinions, and you have to respect that, right? And we'll come to some of those aspects. And these 7 characteristics: content-driven, context-centric, service-oriented, and endpoint agnostic, inherently social, data-driven, and transformational instead of transactional. Let me touch upon these in the next slide. But the bottom line here is that consumerware will bridge the final frontier in human-machine interaction. So we have a little bit of a Star Trek thing going on here, except that we're not going into space. We are actually exploring our own internals, and maybe there is human implants and all that. We are very close to the devices that we're going to be working with, right? So to understand consumerware a little more, I want to do 2 things here. One is that I'll talk about consumerware characteristics. There are 10 characteristics that when I looked at it, I've been talking about it, writing about it for over a year now, and there are 10 characteristics which are categorized into 3 buckets that I want to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about, it's not just enough to look at these characteristics and just go home, very happy that you learned something, but actually what are the implications? So I'm going to talk about 5 implications also of this consumerware revolution, right? So the first set of characteristics out of 10, the 4 characteristics, the first set of characteristics are core software characteristics. And let me explain that with some examples. So content-centric, data-driven, transformational, service-oriented. A lot of consumerware today actually lies on runs on your mobile phones and tablets. The Facebook application that you run on your mobile phone, when you open it, what do you see? What's the screen that you see? You see the news feed, which is content, right? Whereas on a desktop and laptop, when you opened, what you saw was file, edit, tools, all that menu and all, and content was a second-class citizen. On mobile phones today, content is a first-class citizen, right? So similarly, in your IoT Internet of Things, those dashboards and all that, a lot of content that is being generated, you need to analyze that and put all of that together, for it to be really useful to human beings. I don't have much time to talk about this. A lot of these things are actually explained in a couple of white papers that we have published on our website. I'll show you that towards the end. So very quickly, content-centric, data-driven, and we've all been talking about data-driven. By transformational, I mean that today the software world that we have, the web-based, HTTP-based thing, it's all stateless. It's a very request-response kind of a thing. So I request something, I get a response. I request something, I get a response. I request something, I get a response. That's the nature of software today, right? And thanks to HTTP, and that's what was required when HTTP came about. But consumerware, or the mobile software, or whatever you want to call it, it's very transformational. It knows what am I doing. I'm talking right now, I'm in Bangalore. Right now, am I working or am I at leisure? All of that, right? So very stateful and transformational, and with state transformations, etc. It is, and lastly, it is service oriented. From a software perspective, software as a service and all that, we know enough about it, but you don't really buy software in CDs anymore. That went out of fashion. So it's all service oriented. So those are the 4 software characteristics. The second set of characteristics, 3 of them, is actually interface characteristics, which is user interface and how the software pieces themselves, consumerware pieces themselves interact with each other. So the interface is that it's very contextual. And by contextual again I mean things like it knowing exactly what I want to do. Am I sleeping? Can I be disturbed? Is it important enough to disturb me? And all of that, and my location, etc. By ultra client computing I mean sensor driven ultra client computing. And endpoint agnostic, which is that we fret about so many different types of devices, form factors and all that, but that's a reality that we have to live with. Whatever we build on top of these devices has to work on multiple different platforms. And the final set of characteristics is usage based. Do users use consumerware and these applications differently? They absolutely use it very differently. They look at it differently. It's very different from the way they use Gmail on a browser window, right? So gamified, social, and reach response based. By reach response based, I mean that as a user, I'm always on. There's no time that, because it's all transformational. So transformational means that the software is always on, never really sleeps. And by reach response based means I'm always on. I'm always working, for example. So these are a set of characteristics. I think we have a time for a couple of questions, and then before I move on, I want to make this interactive. If there are any questions in terms of characteristics? Okay, let's move on. So there are 5 implications that I wanted to talk about when it comes to consumerware. The first implication is that fragmentation is a problem that nobody else will, it's not a problem that someone else is going to solve. Whether it's Android platform fragmentation, the different technology stacks, and all of that. And fragmentation is a reality. But if you look at fragmentation, it's not just about hardware. So there's hardware fragmentation, of course. There's consumer preferences, like I said, back-end systems, form factors, technologies. So fragmentation is something that all of us have to live with. And not just live with, but actually thrive. And actually, I'll give an example of how fragmentation can actually be used. It's not something that you just adjust to, but actually thrive on it, right, and exploit actively. So let's look at consumer preferences. There are people who love Apple. There are people who absolutely hate Apple for their philosophy. People, Samsung fans, they like Samsung and they don't like anything else. There are Microsoft fans who say that Apple is not the company that that adheres to my philosophies, kind of a thing. So as you build your Internet of Things products, wearable devices, or whatever devices that you're working on, you can actually use consumer preferences and make that fragmented thing into a market segment. So you have to be, it's very critical that whatever device you're building, whatever service that you're building, it's very critical that it is very targeted, focused and targeted towards the market that you want to go after. Whether it's demographics, psychographics, whatever it is. So that's very critical. So that's an example of how fragmentation is something that we not only have to live with, but we actually can thrive on it, right? It will be very foolhardy to target 100% of the market in any of these things, right? As I'm sure like practitioners here would have realized that if I build a device that satisfies everyone, it usually doesn't happen. You have to understand who is the person who's going to actually satisfy, whether it's women, men, children, or people of certain psychological profile kind of a thing, right? That's the first implication. The second one is give creativity a chance. Are there any creative designers in the room? Writers, designers, people who do creative work? Show of hands. I thought as much. So creativity is something that actually, from a software side, from a mobile application development perspective, that has become very critical. And so you need to give space to creativity. So the devices that you build, you have to make multiple, I'm sure you make multiple prototypes, but then be ready to throw them away. And I come from a software background, and I can give you that example where all these fancy, beautiful applications that you see on mobile, very few of them, probably none of them, were actually built in a month or 6 weeks, and suddenly they are so beautiful. They went through a lot of iterations, a lot of throwaway. Facebook app on iPhone, how many of you use it here? I'm sure all of you use, most of you use it, right? So Facebook app on iPhone used to suck till about 4 to 5 months ago. It used to be really, really bad. People really disliked it, right? Choice of technologies, a lot of things happened. But then they iterated, and now it's a pretty good app. LinkedIn, same story. It used to be really bad. Now it's really good, right? So similarly, all the user experience, usability, and all that, you'll need creative designers to come in and help you, right? So maybe next year, next edition of this conference, or the year after, we'll see some creative folks coming in and talking about usability, user experience, and all of that. The third one is the trade in the value you provide. So this goes straight away to the business model. A lot of you, I think, build devices thinking that, okay, this is the device that I can sell, and someone is going to pay me money for it. But that's not necessarily the way that you would monetize, right? That's also going to evolve. So you build a device. Maybe you have to give away the device free, or maybe it's subsidized, and maybe you charge for a service. If there is a device that goes on my car, and you tie up with an OEM, with a Hyundai, for example, you put in the device over there in my car, which monitors my car's performance, fuel efficiency, and all of that. It will actually need to. It can actually connect to all other Hyundai cars and tell me whether I am doing better or worse. And you can charge for the service, and the product can actually be subsidized. Right? So the question to ask here is that, are you building a product or a service? Give a lot of thought to how is it just a gadget that you're building, or is it a service that you're going to build on top of that? What do people value? Is it the data? Maybe it's not even the product or the service that people are going to value, or the consumers are not going to value them at all. But when you gather all this data, maybe there's a third person who's interested. Maybe there's an insurance company that's interested. Maybe there's a research group which is interested in this consumer profile, right? All of that. So monetize the thing that people really value. Fourth one is the social concept, and I was very surprised. I think Priya, the speaker before, he alluded to social, and I since I've come here, I've been thinking about Internet of Things. And I said, okay, so internet for all these years meant Internet of people. That people was implicit, right? So now we talk about Internet of Things. Today when we say social, implicitly what we mean is social of people. But can there be a social of things? Can my car talk to all the other cars and not necessarily like talk to it and make some emotions, but actually gather all the data and then interpret its own data and do something and give me something of value, right? So that's actually almost like a social of things. It sounds crazy today, but in 2-3 years someone is going to coin a nice fancy term called social of things, and that will become a rage, right? So we've been hearing about self-learning, self-correcting systems because social of things will probably come in. Collective knowledge that the devices will gather. Another very nuanced point here is that today, no one really sells to an individual. You always have to remember that whatever you sell, you're selling to a network, because it's very easy for a person to go badmouth you or your product or your company on Twitter or Facebook or on all these social platforms. So whenever you sell to someone, first of all, you're not selling a product and then saying goodbye, I'm not going to see your face again until you need the product again, because you're going to probably be charging some kind of a service. And so it's an ongoing relationship, and essentially in that person's reference will give you actually more business and all that, right? So sell to a network, right? That's another aspect of social. And finally, there are more actually implications. Our white paper covers it in a lot of detail. I'm just rushing through some of these things. Back-end unifications. There's been a lot of back-end fragmentation that has been going on over the last 20 years, especially in the context of enterprise. Marketing team says that, you know what, Salesforce is the best CRM and I want to use that. HR team says that, you know, maybe not SAP or PeopleSoft is the best one. So actually this fragmentation at the back end, with the mobile phones and these kind of services that we're talking about, they actually talk to these multiple backends, and we have been talking about gateway, whether the gateway talks to these backends and my device talks only to the gateway and all that. However we structure it, at the back end, all these, we're talking about CRM, inventory, HR systems, and there's LinkedIn here, and I deliberately put LinkedIn here because these are all internal systems to an enterprise or an organization. But LinkedIn, it's a public network. It could be weather, it could be maps or whatever, right? So all these things have to be mashed up, and eventually they have to make their way to the mobile device or to the person who's using it. Content-driven software, granular interface, and value-centric usage. That's sort of the bottom line. I don't have the time to get into these things, but these are the three: software, interface, and usage are the three sets of characteristics. And this sort of explains that. The white paper goes into it in more detail. So this is our link, the white paper. So we have a couple of white papers, one that we launched just a couple of days ago. I would highly encourage everyone, whoever is interested and intrigued by this whole concept and beyond the electronics and gadgetry that you guys I'm sure are very good at. If you're seriously thinking about building a product, running a service on top of it, building software on top of it, etc., I would encourage you to go read our white paper. Maybe it will throw up some ideas in terms of how do you monetize and create a business out of your product. And lastly, in conclusion, I think this has been quoted by probably every alternate speaker that comes in. Whatever, some few dozens of billion devices are going to be there by 2020. What I wanted to highlight in this slide was that the population by 2020 is also important. You might have billions of devices. So what? What do I do, right? But the population is predicted to be around 7.5 billion, right? And whether it's 50 or 24 or 25, what it means is that you're probably going to have like 6 to 7 devices per person on the planet. 3 of the devices that we know today are phone, tablet, and computer. Let's say computer is going to be alive till 2020, the way we see it. And hopefully that doesn't become obsolete very soon, in 7 years. But let's say these 3 devices are there. What you really need to think about, like, what else? Is it wearable devices for a person, or is it industrial automation systems? What are those devices? I'm sure the devices that you're working on ultimately will figure out over here somewhere. And remember that this is the average that people are talking about. And considering that so many people are actually going to be not connected to the internet and not really have any devices with them, this number will actually be much higher for the target segment that you might be looking at, the urban segment or whatever it is that you're targeting, right? So the real number is actually going to be much higher than 6 to 7, right? And as I said, I mean, so thanks. I would love to answer some questions. Just a quick plug, Person Systems. I mean, we opened our office in Bangalore just 2-3 months ago, so we are very new to the city. We've been in Pune for a long time. We have offices in Nagpur, Goa, and Hyderabad, other than Pune, in addition to the offices abroad. So we opened an office in Bangalore. Any questions on the consumerware? Anything else?
Yeah, I would like to know the kind of systems you are building towards meeting this IoT.
So we are an application, mostly, I mean, I would say, mostly we're an application level player. So mobile, social, analytics, all these areas that we develop applications. So a lot of them actually ride on these platforms, right? So IoT itself, there are platforms I think emerging that I know a lot of people, Freescale and all these companies are working on. And after those platforms are available, I think those applications will come in, and that's when we'll start seeing applications to be built for cars or home automation systems and all of that. Currently, it's at a conceptual stage for us because we're more focused on the software side of things, and then once those platforms are there, we'll build some of those applications.
Good, thank you.
You had a question?
Yes, sir. since we have seen back in the years, electronics has got a rapid growth, and many computing devices and many electronic devices are coming to the market. So my question is that, as you talk that by 2020 we will have a 7.6, which is being user friendly. The devices are since, although they are increasing day by day. So how it is means we are saying the technology is user friendly, but we are using a cell phone for some specific purpose, that communication, that and we are using iPod and all other many devices we are using.
Yeah.
So how it is become the consumer friendly, because we are going to increase every day. New devices are coming.
So how it's going to become consumer friendly? How these devices?
Yeah, means we are. So back in the days we were using only one electronic devices, and by the other work we will be doing, and now it is trend to increase the per person that electronic devices. So how it is become, taking care of that all the devices and.
Yeah, that a lot of electronics engineers are building these nice cool gadgets. I see wonderful things that are there in the expo.
We are thinking that are consumer friendly, but it is just increasing per person the electronic devices, making them.
Yeah, so for to make them consumer friendly, you need to really be thinking about the consumer. You need to be thinking about the usability, user experience, and there are people who actually have studied user experience, usability at depth. And really understand the consumer psychology and all that, right? It's a very emerging field. So the sooner you embrace those creative designers who can tell you that this device is not will not work, because it doesn't, I cannot hold it properly, those kind of things. All that is going to become important. I don't know if it answers the question. We can take it offline. I guess we're running out of time, but I don't know if it answers the question. But usability, user experience is it's going to be critical. It's been a lifeblood for us in software. And I'm seeing all this buzz that's going on in the hardware world, in the electronics world, and the sooner that you embrace these creative designers to come in and help design products from a creative perspective, aesthetics and all that, the better and more useful it would be. Okay, I think that's what we have time for. Thanks everyone. I'm available here if you have any questions. We can take it offline.
Thank you so much, sir. And now we move on to our last session in this hall. And for the same, we would like to introduce Mr. Shanmuga Sundaram M. Shan possesses 14 patents in the areas of telecoms, automotive, and M2M. He has 13 years of IT industry experience in the areas of R&D with respect to telecoms, automotive, M2M, etc., filing patents, inventions, converting inventions to successful products, customer projects, and maintenance projects. An accomplished master and successful implementer in M2M technologies who proved himself again and again in creating and deploying real-world cutting-edge M2M products. Some of the products are Logica EMO, static asset monitoring, and retail innovations. These inventions have won numerous awards including Golden Peacock Award, NASSCOM Award, the Economist Award, etc. These inventions provided Logica with much needed global exposure in many different domains including automotive technologies. So would hand over to Shan. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks a lot. My name is Shanmuga Sundaram, and here in this session I'm going to talk about MTM in a different perspective. All along we have been talking about MTM in a perspective wherein there is a device and we are expecting data from the device. You push data into the cloud and you store the data in the cloud, and then what happens, you consume the data through various gadgets, maybe mobile phones or PCs or whatever. So machines, as I told you, connected to the internet, are connected to each other directly, peer-to-peer communication, or connected to each other through internet, or no human intervention in sending and receiving data is what's happening with respect to MTM nowadays, whether wired or wireless. So this is happening, because of so many factors. Why we are talking about MTM here? MTM is not such a magic thing which is happening nowadays. It's not a new technology. It's not a new standard or whatever. It's not a new invention. If you see, it's all normal stuff. Earlier we had PC to PC communicating each other. we are sending emails through PCs and somebody is seeing that email and data or whatever. So the same thing is happening with machines. Nothing different, nothing, nothing great. So why it's happening? Because of these things. Controllers have become small and cheap. 32-bit controllers you can get for 8-bit controllers cost nowadays. And wireless standards have matured in such a way that you can put the wireless standards inside the 32-bit controllers. Earlier it was so costly. And then GSM penetration has become so huge that anywhere and everywhere GSM connectivity is there. And sensors have become cheaper. And customers have become internet savvy and they demand the possibilities. And if you see here, it's not on magic. MTM is, it's a kind of a fad right now. I can talk about that as a fad right now. So it's all, like earlier we had, Java as a fad. Earlier to that something else. So now MTM is a fad, IoT is a fad. So the reason why we are talking about it is because it's becoming a possibility. Not because it's an invention. So it's all just connections to the cloud, nothing else. And instead of you sending a mail, something else, like that plant is sending a tweet. It's not a big deal. Just a data transmission and reception. Again same, nothing else. And decisions at the back end mostly. So for example, what happens? You have trillions and trillions of data points going into a cloud, data storage, and you have big data to do some analysis of the data, to make sense of the data. What is the data, what it is, those kind of stuff. For example, let us take a vehicle tracking system. You have millions and millions of data points related to GPS points, where the driver went, what he did, this, blah, 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 a number of things. And the point is this, the decisions are taken at the back end by the owners of the fleet management system or the consumers of the fleet management system, and to do something about it. Here MTM is just a kind of what you call platform. It's an inanimate platform. It's not intelligent. And machines don't talk to each other in an intelligent way, to make sense of the data. So why I'm talking about this in a kind of a little bit negative way, something like we are in the cusp of a revolution, wherein that MTM is going to pass over the data collection and data transmission stage and into an artificial intelligence stage. It's already happening. And it's not well documented anywhere else, but it's already happening in companies like Google and Microsoft. The crux of my talk is that, to actually pass that information to you guys related to how this kind of artificial intelligence, in other words, they are not talking about artificial intelligence as artificial intelligence, but they are using that artificial intelligence into MTM. As I told you, machines are dumb relatively right now. Same thing here, logic is concentrated at the back end, so decisions are being made at the back end. So no proper architecture which will allow the machines to talk to each other right now. So one guy will be having a kind of a set of protocols to talk to his own back end, another guy will have his own this one protocols to talk. Standards are not maturing. They are in a kind of a stalemate right now. One MTM is one standard, another HC MTM is another standard. Both are in a divergent way right now. We don't know what will happen to those standards. And intelligence is not there. And the point is, people are not talking about intelligence right now in MTM scenario. The reason being, the controllers are 8-bit or 32-bit, very small RAM controllers. So they are not talking about intelligence right now. What I'm going to talk about is how we can bring intelligence into the MTM scenario, even with 8-bit controllers, even with 32-bit controllers, even with the kind of 20 KB RAM, you can build intelligence. So what is artificial intelligence? As we know, it's all either neural networks or heuristics based. Neural networks are training, like you have Siri in your Apple phone, you have to train it, or somebody would have trained it with respect to what a word is. And heuristic based is all rule based stuff. So you frame rules in a rule engine, and then based on those rules it will take some decisions based on those rules. So these type of artificial intelligence are available right now.